Okay. In this series of videos, we're going to talk about adjusting column widths, adjusting row heights, merging cells, and adding fill colors to cells. Okay, so let's start here with adjusting column widths. So once again, I'm in the Type tool, and right now, if I were to mouse over the vertical line that separates the third column from the fourth column, if I just click and drag, you will notice that I actually closed in on that third column right here. Basically, clicking and dragging just pulls that over. And it actually changed the width of the table itself. If I did the same thing here between the second and third, click and drag, and as you notice, the second column has been altered and the cell, the overall table size has changed. However, let's say I just want to adjust the column widths, but I want to keep the table the same size. Well, here's where that shift modifier key comes in again. So I put my cursor over that line that separates the third row from the fourth row, put my finger on the shift key, click and drag, and as you can see, what I've done now is I collapsed the width of the third column, but I expanded the width of the fourth column. But the key is I did not change the overall size of the table. Now I'm going to show you something else. Let's say, for example, I want this whole table to be narrower, all right, but I want the rows to remain the same width. So one of the things I can do is I can click and drag, and as you can see, I grabbed the last line of the table. I kept my finger on the shift modifier key, and as you can see, it pulled them in equally. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is I can grab the last line on the last row, just pull it in, and then I can select the entire table. And the best way to do that, I'm going to do it the way I showed you, is the arrow in the upper left hand corner, click and you selected the entire thing, or you can just swipe the entire table. And then I can say table, I can say, go down to it says distribute columns evenly. So now, whatever the width that I decided I wanted my table to be, I highlight all of the cells that are within, and then I can say distribute columns with evenly. Okay, in like manner, just as I adjusted the column widths, I will do the same thing with the row heights. For example, like we did initially, if I just mouse over with the Type tool, the bottom line of the bottom row, you see I get the double arrows pointing up and down. If I put my finger on the shift key, click and drag, you can see, again, it will scale it proportionately as I move it up. Or if I just move it up and I've shortened that very last row, I can highlight the entire table, go up to table, and then I can say distribute rows evenly. So that's how you would actually adjust the height of your table rows. Now, in addition to manually doing that, adjusting the height and the width, you can actually also do it. You can put in the actual values that you want. So let's say, for example, as I have this entire table selected, I go up to table, and then I can go down to cell options, slide over to where it says text, and then what I can do now is I can go over to rows and columns. And once I do that, you're going to see I'll get this dialog box right here. And at this point, I can I can actually plug in the numbers that I want. So let's say, for example, right now, the setting says at least 5p10, whatever it is. Let's say I change that to 4. Okay, and then I hit the tab key, and as you can see that the height of these cells individually are all 4 picas. And then I can say the max width, I can say, let's make that, right now it says 50. Let's make that, well actually before we go into this, let's go to the column width. The column width says 9p and change. Let's just make that 8p. And as you can see now, I can actually put in the specs that I want versus just arbitrarily scaling up and down. All right. Now, what this max width means is that if I say, okay, the max width is going to be 50, that means that the table cannot go beyond that point. So anyway, that's how you can actually manually put in the specs for the sizes of your rows and your columns, or you can actually put in the amounts that you want. Okay, one thing to keep in mind is even though you saw that I made the height and the width a certain size, the height in particular is actually going to be the height of a cell will adjust based on the content. For example, let's just say I put some content on the inside of this first cell. All right, and then I put return in there. I copy that and I paste it in again. All right, I paste it and paste it. And if you notice, as I'm pasting it in, it's changing the overall height of this particular row, even though I put in a specific amount. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to bring it back to where it was. I am going to highlight this entire table. I'm going to go up to table, go down to where it says cell options, go over to rows and columns, and then what you see, it says row height at least 4p. Let's change that to exactly 4p. And let's see what happens. We'll say OK. So now I'm going to put in the content again. And if you notice, as I try to add more content, you see this little red marker comes up. What's happening is it's not going to allow, it's only going to put in as much content that can be held within that 4 pica height. Anything beyond that point is going to become overset text. So this way now, you can actually control the height of your row by saying exactly versus at least. Next up, let's talk about merging cells. Okay, if you notice down below where we have name, address, name, address, name, address. Really, ideally what I want to have is I want to have the header that says company names and addresses to go underneath in alphabetical order. Well, I actually want that to straddle both columns. But as you can see right now, I'm not able to do that. So here's what I can do. Where it says address, I'm going to delete that address right there. Then I'm going to highlight both cells that are in the top row in the first and second column. So I highlight them, and then I can say table merge. So now once I've done that, I've actually created one long cell which has company names and addresses to go underneath in alphabetical order. Well, as a graphic designer, really what I want to do is I want to have this copy setting centered within that cell. So I can actually, I don't even have to select the entire line of text, just put my cursor in that first line, and I can say center it. But now, as the designer, let's say I want to have it centered top and bottom. Well, that's not a problem either. What I would do is I would, using the arrow that will select the actual row, click on that, go up to table, drop down to cell options, slide over to where it says text. Right, and at this point, you can see the vertical alignment right now is aligned to top. I can say align center. And once I've done that, you can see now I have the text is centered from left to right, and it's centered from top to bottom within that cell. Click off, hit the W so I can preview it, and yeah, that's pretty much what I want. Lastly, in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to color these cells. So let's say, for example, coloring a cell in a table cell in InDesign is much like coloring any other frame. You would select it, highlight it, and give it a color. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to maybe just highlight just the name cell, I can highlight that. I can go over to my my swatch palette, and I can say make that a fill of magenta. Okay, and again I can highlight maybe two cells, and I say give that a fill of cyan. And so it's exactly the exact same way. Okay, but there is something else you can do with coloring your cells, which can be kind of cool. What you can do is you can select the entire table. All right, you can go up to table, drop down to where it says table options, and then you can slide over to something that says alternating fills, and you click on that. Then you're going to get this dialog box right here, and you can say, all right, I want to have every other row. Okay, so starting with the first row, and in this particular exercise I'll make it, the color will be black, but it'll be a 20% tint of black, and then the second row is going to be none. So basically it's going to go, you know, a gray, none scenario. So I can say okay. And once I've done that, click off, preview it, and you can see we have not only just these cells filled, but we've actually controlled which rows will have color and which rows will not.